This civil war is only possible because the Empire is near breaking point. The Battle of the Red Ring may have been a triumphant success, with the Imperial city restored to the Empire, but the Great War did not end well for the Imperials. It's important to remember that the Imperials also venerated Talos, and were it up to them, the free worship of the Nine Divines would be allowed. But the Empire finds itself in a position where they have to take orders from the High Elves, lest they provoke another war and be destroyed completely.
Partially wrong. I already explained on my previous video that the Imperials tried their best to not enforce the ban of Talos worship. So no, they do not take orders from the High Elves. But if they simply refused to let the Thalmor justiciars in Skyrim, they would easily be destroyed by the Dominion.
The White Gold Concordat was signed by Emperor Titus Mede II to buy time for the Empire to rebuild its military strength. The tenacity of the Red Guards in their ongoing conflict with the Dominion has indirectly benefited the Empire greatly. The Empire may have buckled under the Dominion's pressure, but in Hammerfell, the war dragged on for 5 more years, and the terms of the Second Treaty of Stros M'Kai were far more favourable to the Red Guards than the terms of the White Gold Concordat were for the Imperials.
Regarding this conflict that, as you said, lasted for 5 years, it appears you neglected to mention how Lady Aranelia's forces were initially weakened, mostly thanks to General Decianus' Invalids, by the way, which certainly gave a great advantage to Hammerfell, at least in the beginning of the war, and that such war was fought to a standstill and left southern Hammerfell devastated. At that point, the Dominion had no reason to fight the Red Guards anymore, because the regions that were ceded to the Dominion were nearly destroyed. This is very important because it shows that the Red Guards did not simply kick the Dominion out of Hammerfell by themselves, as many people think they did.
Nevertheless, with the Dominion losing numbers in the deserts of Hammerfell, the Empire were given enough respite to recuperate their legions.
Do you really think that a war that lasted just 5 years would give the Empire enough time to significantly increase the size of its forces through mass recruiting? The nearly 30 years since the Great War certainly did so, but 5 years right after the Great War ended?
Are you serious?
They were now able to defend their southern borders while also committing forces to the war in the north.
Wait a minute. So now you say that the Empire is keeping part of its men in the southern border to prevent a Dominion invasion, which confirms what I said in my previous video, and contradicts your own claim that the fact that the Stormcloak rebellion is still a thing is proof that the Empire is not as strong as it has been historically? Because if part of the Legion is being kept in the southern border with the Dominion, and as General Tullius reveals, it is most of the Legion, then the military power the Empire has in Skyrim is nothing compared to what it has in Cyrodiil. Thus, the first argument you gave about the Stormcloaks being proof the Empire is weak is just wrong. Well,
congratulations, you played yourself.
And you also forgot to mention how the reinforcements to the war in the north were very few, which forced the legions in Skyrim to mostly rely on locally recruited men.
As of the 201st year of the Fourth Era, both sides are evenly matched.
No, they aren't, because the legions in Cyrodiil are way more powerful than the ones in Skyrim, as I explained. So having in mind how the Stormcloaks have been fighting the legions of Skyrim to a standstill for years, they would be crushed by the ones in Cyrodiil.
A classified Thalmor dossier says, as long as the civil war proceeds in its current indecisive fashion, we should remain hands-off. It seems the Thalmor have elected to allow their enemies to weaken one another.
You realize this is a very good reason to why you should oppose the Stormcloaks, don't you? Because if it wasn't for Ulfrick, if it wasn't for him thinking it was the Emperor who ordered his arrest, when it was actually Jarl Hrolfdir's orders, as I explained in my previous video, and rebelling against the Empire as a whole instead of demanding justice from Markarth specifically, this war would never be a thing to begin with, and the Thalmor, the Aldmeri Dominion, would not be able to use it as means to an end to weaken Skyrim, because it wouldn't have started in the first place. If it wasn't for Ulfrick starting his rebellion, had he tried to reach Skyrim's independence through diplomacy and asked High King Torrik to declare independence, instead of starting a rebellion against the Empire and killing High King Torrik, Skyrim would not be weakened, and the Thalmor would not be using this war as means to an end to weaken Skyrim. Skyrim is weakened thanks to Ulfrick's Stormcloak, and that, FudgeMuppet, is a pretty damn good reason to oppose the Stormcloaks.
Given enough time to recover their strength, there is a strong case to be made for Imperial control over Skyrim. The Empire have experience governing foreign lands. Skyrim itself has been a part of the Empire multiple times, dating back as early as the First Era. Portions of southern Skyrim were conquered by the Elysians, but it was Riemann Cyrodiil who won the support of the Nords entirely, bringing them willingly into his united Tamriel. Tiber Septim achieved the same feat, bringing the Jarls of Skyrim into the Septim Empire. But these old iterations of the Cyrodiilic Empire were far more dominant than the Mede dynasty of the Fourth Era. Even excluding the potential assassination of Titus Mede II, the Empire in the present day aren't capable of inspiring the same degree of loyalty that Riemann Cyrodiil and Tiber Septim were. How could the Empire properly govern Skyrim when they could only just muster enough men to protect their southern borders from the looming threat of the Dominion?
Once again you contradict yourself, because what you said here is incompatible with your claim of the Stormcloak Rebellion and the legions of Skyrim fighting at a standstill being proof of the Empire's weakness. And as I said in my previous video, Cyrodiil leaves the vast majority of the decisions beyond Cyrodiilic land to the local governments, as long as they accept the Emperor's authority, pay the taxes, and report for duty when the Empire needs their aid.
On top of this, no matter how famous Imperials are for their diplomacy, they can't expect to understand the wants and needs of the Nords the way a domestic ruler could.
This is by far the most ridiculous and absurd argument you gave in this video. First, because it is still Skyrim's Jarls and High King who dictate the vast majority of the rules in the province, and second, because even domestic rulers may not understand or not care about the needs and dreams of their people. By this logic, the United States of America should let the Middle Eastern jihadist militias rule their own lands, because the Americans can expect to understand the wants and needs of the Middle Eastern the way a domestic ruler could. And this is just one example of countless others of why this claim makes no sense.
How about the Stormcloaks? Starting a rebellion is easy, but establishing order and stability when the swords are sheathed is another thing altogether. The sons and daughters of Skyrim are renowned for their ferocity and enthusiasm in battle, and Ulfric Stormcloak, the figurehead of the Nordic rebellion, is just as skilled in rhetoric as he is in combat.
Ulfric may be a skilled tactician, but as it shows, his forces, unlike the Empire's, lack organization, discipline, and good equipment, this last one at least when it comes to their armor. They seem to have little to no discipline when it comes to their weapons of choice. Most of the soldiers use simple mail shirts or halberds that barely cover their limbs, just like regular city guards, and some The Elder Scrolls Legends cards from the Heroes of Skyrim expansion show Stormcloak soldiers going to the battlefield without helmets. Discipline and organization are extremely important, and especially important when you are dealing with an enemy that is more powerful than you. Unless you have more soldiers than the enemy has arrows or bullets, which by the way was the case of the Soviet Union during World War II, if you do not have discipline and organization in your ranks, you easily get massacred. Then you say, but the Empire has battle equipment as well, because all Imperial soldiers use leather armor. And I say, no, not all of them. In the game, yes, but in the lore, not so much. Stormcloak soldiers may say that Legion soldiers gleam like fresh fallen snow and clank like a kitchen. They had this way, we'll know it. Mentioning characteristics of plate armor, which is mostly heavy armor in game, and Beyrand, the blacksmith at Solitude, from who the player can get the equipment after joining the Legion, says that heavy armor is for full-on combat. This fact is also enforced by some cards from the Elder Scrolls Legends that show a great part of the Imperial soldiers using plate armor. In fact, These cards also show how the Imperials are more organized and disciplined than the rebels. The morale of the Stormcloaks is way higher than the Imperials, that's for sure. But that's the only thing the Stormcloaks are better in than the Imperials. That is the only advantage the Stormcloak army has over the Imperial army. And morale by itself does not win wars.
The faction's recruitment essays and oaths are full of emotive language, and it's easy to see how the target of such speech could be inspired to join the ranks of the Stormcloaks.
You talk too much about inspiring speeches, but while high morale is important when fighting on wars, it is not enough by itself, and you're ignoring how the Stormcloaks lack discipline, organization, and good armor, as I already explained.
The text called Nords Arise says this about the rebellion's leader. Like Isgramor, Ulfric Stormcloak is a true hero of Skyrim. His name will ring in Sovngarde for generations to come. Only he had the courage to single out King Torygg and challenge him to trial by arms. Ulfric's Fum, a gift from Talos himself, struck down this traitorous ruler, and by his death we are now free of our imperial shackles and the Thalmor overlords that darken the imperial throne. The Empire has sent its legions to govern us. They have enlisted our own countrymen to their cause. They have set brother against brother, father against son. They have caused Skyrim to battle itself in their name, for their cause. Do not let them divide us. Do not let them conquer us. Reject the imperial law that forbids the worship of Talos. Join Ulfric Stormcloak and his cause.
Let me get this straight. You blame the author of The Bear of Markarth for being biased, but you use the book Nords Arise as an argument here? So many contradictions here.
To those with an alternate perspective, these stirring words could be translated as, Ulfric ignored diplomacy to pursue violence, he abused his Fuum to slay a young High King, and now the Empire is trying with all its might to maintain order by uprooting the weeds of revolt, before they can grow out of control. But which story is more inspiring? Should you join the Stormcloaks, you will pledge the following oath. I do swear my blood and honour to the service of Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm and true High King of Skyrim. As Talos is my witness, may this oath bind me to death and beyond, even to my lord as to my fellow brothers and sisters in arms. All hail the Stormcloaks, the true sons and daughters of Skyrim. But does effective rhetoric translate to effective governance? We also know that Ulfric Stormcloak is a decorated military leader, and his relentless unyielding demeanour could be exactly what Skyrim needs in the face of elven aggression. But the argument can also be made that, if the Imperial accounts of the Markarth incident are accurate, combined with his impetuous handling of High King Torygg, Ulfric may be far too brutal to ever win over the affections of the entire province. He is considered by Empire loyalists to be brutal, controversial and divisive, and a ruler who is incapable of showing mercy is on the precipice of becoming a tyrant.
The fact that Ulfric is still brutal and may easily become a tyrant, as if he wasn't one already, is one of the main reasons to oppose him. How can you call someone a freedom fighter and a good leader when he ruthlessly persecutes all those who disagree with him?
There is also the unavoidable reality that a Stormcloak-controlled Skyrim is not an ideal outcome for other races in the province. Nords in general tolerate other races, but they aren't particularly fond of diversity, and Ulfric famously forbade the Argonian population of Windhelm from entering the city. He has also shown his indifference regarding the Dunmer situation in the Grey Quarter. For a Nord, however, the Stormcloaks without a doubt have your best interests in mind. Not the Empire's interests, not the Dominion's interests, but the Nords of Skyrim's interests in mind.
I'll be honest here. For me, the racism card is the worst argument to oppose the Stormcloaks, because, well, it mainly happens in Windhelm. There's even a Redguard couple in Markarth that says their oldest son, Cade, joined the Stormcloaks, which means that Ulfric is prejudiced against non-human races, non-men. And we can see this clearly if we compare the way he treats the Dunmer and the Argonians in Windhelm to the way he treats non-Nord men.
When comparing the Empire with the Stormcloaks, it's akin to comparing a handshake and a fist to the face. The Empire are realistic about their intention to maintain control over their vassal provinces.
And once again you ignore how most of the rules are dictated by the Jarls and Kings. And once again you ignore how the vast majority of Skyrim's legionnaires are locally recruited Nords, which is why Skyrim's war is a civil war. It's half of the Nords who chose to support the Empire, not the Empire who's fighting against the Nords.
and they are full of compromises. The Stormcloaks, on the other hand, make no compromises, and will resort to war before making a single sacrifice. Both qualities have their advantages and their disadvantages, but I believe, given the current circumstances in Tamriel, one is preferable to the well-being of Skyrim. The cold, sharp edge of the blade may not be as pleasant as a signed agreement and a handshake, but in present-day Skyrim, the time for appeasement has passed. The Stormcloaks see the threat of the Aldmeri Dominion, who pull the strings of the weakened Empire.
And the Imperials do see this threat as well, as I showed in my previous video, and I will gladly show it again.
Fair enough. We're driving the Stormcloaks back well enough at the moment, but we're already overstretched. That's what comes of trying to win a war with a bare handful of legions. If the Emperor would just give me the reinforcements I've requested. Most of the Legion is tied down on the border with the Aldmeri Dominion. The Emperor can't afford to risk weakening Cyrodiil's defenses. From the Imperial City, our war here is just a sideshow. An interlude before the main event against the Thalmor resumes. Yes, fine. I'll come to this Greybeard Council. For all the good it will do.
The difference is that the Empire, unlike the Stormcloaks, know how powerful the Aldmeri Dominion really is, which is why they try to preserve the peace made with the Dominion, to be able to gather strength and rebuild the Imperial armies for as long as possible, to be able to effectively fight back when the next war against the Aldmeri Dominion begins. Which, by the way, means the Aldmeri Dominion does not pull the strings of the Empire.
And they juxtapose it with the plight of Ysgramor and the Atmorans against the Snow Elves. Do not let the lessons of history go unheeded, the text warns.
The Snow Elves were nowhere near as powerful as the Third Aldmeri Dominion, and it took generations until King Harald founded Skyrim as we know it. Follow the analogy.
The Aldmeri Dominion and its Thalmor masters made war upon men, just as the elves made war upon Ysgramor and our people in ancient times. Shining Sarfall was burned to the ground, reduced to ruins and rubble in their treacherous assault. But Ysgramor and his sons gathered the 500 companions and made war upon the elves, casting them out of Skyrim. In the Great War fought by our fathers, the elves again betrayed men by attacking us unprovoked. The Dominion and the Thalmor cannot be trusted. Talos worship is one thing, but another key argument in defense of Ulfrick's rebellion is the scheming of the Dominion. Ulfrick's detractors will be quick to point out his brash and blustering neglect for diplomacy, and it's hard to defend Ulfrick for what he did to hire King Torygg. But if we put it into this perspective, his haste makes much more sense. Ulfrick perceived Torygg as another pawn of the Empire. Like his father Islod, he had no way of knowing Torygg may cooperate. And even then, would it matter whether Torygg was willing to consider his pleas for independence, when every passing day gave the Thalmor more time to tighten their stranglehold on Tamriel? If the Dominion aimed to conquer the whole continent, and the Empire were acting as their lapdog enforcers, what could the Nords do other than fight?
So the fact that Ulfrick saw Torygg as a puppet of the Empire and had no way of knowing he could cooperate justifies him giving Torygg no chance to defend himself by using the Thu'um and later finishing Torygg when he could have spared his opponent, just like how Jorunn spared Fildgor? Yeah, right. And again, the Imperials are not being used as attack dogs or something like this by the Dominion, as I explained more than once both in this video and in my previous video. And if they are managing to tighten their grasp over Tamriel, the Stormcloaks are only helping them in it, willingly or not.
A young and inexperienced king would likely not be able to deliver Skyrim from the imposing threat of Thalmor aggression, but a grizzled veteran, gifted in war and rhetoric, with firm policies on border protection and the protection of human values and religion, well, that seems like the ideal candidate for such trying times.
This argument makes no sense because the Empire has actual generals leading its legions, which gives more room for the Emperor and the kings in other provinces to pay attention to politics, unless the rulers have no other option but to fight, such as during the Battle of the Red Ring, while a king that leads an army does not have enough time to actually rule his lands during war, and that if he doesn't die on the battlefield. Just look at the War of Succession. While it's true that a grizzled veteran would know more about what to do during a war than a young and inexperienced king, a general, someone who has an actual military career and has dedicated his entire life to this career, would be way more efficient in this area than both.
Ironically, it would seem that a united Cyrodiil and Skyrim would be the true best hope for preventing further Aldmeri dominance. But the Empire's greatest boon can also be their greatest weakness, for they are in the heart of Tamriel, and they cannot hope to shut themselves off from the Dominion's pressure. Skyrim, on the other hand, they share borders with the provinces of High Rock, Morrowind and Hammerfell, all of which are free from Aldmeri taint. To the north lies the Sea of Ghosts, a hazardous voyage for even the most agile ships, and to the south, between Skyrim and Cyrodiil, lies the perfect natural defence, the rugged steep slopes of the Dural Mountains, which has scarce few traversable passes.
Your points regarding Skyrim's defenses against an Aldmeri offensive are shown to be useless once we take a look at two simple facts. 1. High Rock and Morrowind may not be interested in helping Skyrim in the future. I mean, High Rock is currently not interested in helping the Stormcloaks anyway. You may argue that it may happen that they may decide to help the Stormcloaks, which is true, but they may also not decide. It is not certain. 2. The Stormcloaks plan to invade the Aldmeri Dominion in the future. This is revealed by both Ulfrick and Galmar. Once you join the Stormcloaks, you can ask Galmar what is the aim of the war, and he will answer, quote-unquote, "First, we will kick the Thalmor and their bloody Imperial puppets out of the country. Then, we will rebuild Skyrim into the land she once was. When we are done with that, we will take our army to the Dominion, and show those pointy-eared bastards not every man is fit to be their slave." In the case of Ulfrick, he tells Rika during Battle for Solitude they will wage their war against the Aldmeri Dominion once they get rid of the Imperial influence in Skyrim. Skyrim's neighbors and natural defenses would be useless for the Stormcloaks if they were on the other side of the continent.
If Skyrim is to remain a land free from Altmer interference,
Free from Altmer interference? You really do not realize that the Thalmor mostly act through infiltration and spying, do you? Must I remind you how they managed to infiltrate Riften once, and possibly twice, to hunt Esbern, having in mind that even if Riften is conquered by the Imperials before the A Cornered Rat quest, the Thalmor will still have previously infiltrated a Stormcloak-controlled Riften? And that without mentioning the content of the book Flight from the Thalmor that I already mentioned in the previous video, which shows the Thalmor mostly act alone from the shadows, even in Imperial-controlled holds. A Stormcloak victory would not do much in practice, because simply kicking the Thalmor from Skyrim would mean they would just infiltrate in the province and kidnap Talos worshippers secretly from the shadows, which wouldn't be too different from what they already do, as I explained.
where a Nord can worship their gods without persecution and pass their own laws, not the Dominion-influenced Imperial laws. They must emancipate themselves from the Empire. This is a reality that Ulfric Stormcloak and his Nord rebels understand. And while the Stormcloaks are an inexperienced faction in the political landscape of Tamriel, they are a product of the desperate times, and for the good of Skyrim, the Nords should rule their homeland. When Kine, the Sky Goddess, breathed life upon the summit of the throat of the world, the Nords were born, or so the Nordic tales say. These same sons and daughters of Skyrim, Kine's breath in mortal form, are the key to securing a free, independent and prosperous Skyrim. And there you have it, guys, the Empire versus the Stormcloaks, and who would be best to rule the province of Skyrim. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I know that this is a very subjective topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about why you think one faction may be better to rule. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I've been Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.
Alright, now to close this with the golden key, I find it really interesting how FudgeMuppet neglected to comment about Whiterun when talking about how effective the Stormcloaks would be in ruling Skyrim. Why is Whiterun important in this? Whiterun put to practice the very basis of the Stormcloak rebellion, that is allowing the worship of Talos, despite not supporting either side and denying both the Legion and the Stormcloaks access to Whiterun. However, both Ulfrick and Galmar see Balgruuf as their enemy and eventually decide to attack Whiterun. You may argue that Ulfrick wanted to solve the issue with Whiterun in a more peaceful way but Irileth reveals the Stormcloaks have already sent assassins to kill Balgruuf. So no, the Stormcloaks as a group did not want to take Whiterun peacefully, and Ulfrick knew that. So here you have it, a leader who is supposedly a freedom fighter attacking a neutral territory that put the very basis of his ideology to practice, just because it was neutral. This is a positive proof that Ulfrick is an authoritarian leader that only has the good of his people in mind when it gives him power and expands his position, kind like pretty much every dictator in history. Is this the High King you want for Skyrim, FudgeMuppet? Is this really the leader you think is the best option for the Nords of Skyrim? In my case, my answers to both questions is no. Well, I have to say this video was a pain to watch, and many of my brain cells likely committed suicide thanks to the amount of incorrect and cherry-picked data in FudgeMuppet's video. But it ain't nothing I'm not used to anyway. Well, this is it for this video, and another bias and incorrect data filled video debunked. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you ain't subscribed yet, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Lokthum.
Looking, nothing, no spine.